The Face of War by Martha Gellhorn. The Besieged City, November 1937. At the end of the day, the wind swooped down from the mountains into Madrid and blew the broken glass from the windows of the shelled houses. It rained steadily, and the streets were mustard-colored with mud. It rained, and people talked about the coming offensive, wondering when. Someone said he knew that food and munitions were being moved. Someone else said that Campesino's outfit was in the south or in the north. Villages, 40 of them, in that direction, had been evacuated. The transport unit was ready to go. Have you heard? All front passes have been recalled. Leaves are cancelled. Who told you? Does he know? What? What did you say? So it went. And then the rain would start again. And everyone waited. Waiting is a big part of war, and it is hard to do. Finally it was someone's birthday, or a national holiday, and still cold and nothing happening, only the rain and the rumors. So we decided to have a party. There were 2 of us who lived in this hotel in Madrid, and the third was a visiting friend, an American soldier from the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. A machine-gun bullet had smashed his hip, and he had come to the city on his first leave from the brigade hospital. We took the entire hoard of cans from the bottom bureau drawer, canned soup, canned sardines, canned spinach, canned corned beef, and 2 bottles of new red wine, and planned to eat ourselves warm and talk about something else, not the offensive. We would talk about movie stars and pretty places we had seen, and have a proper party. It went perfectly until the coffee. 1 teaspoonful in a cup of hot water and stir. Then the first shell plunged into the building next door, brought down a shower of glass on the inner courtyard, and rattled the typewriter on the table. The boy with the splintered hip moved his heavy plaster-encased leg and said, "Anybody see my crutches?" He found his crutches and shifted to the place between the windows, and we opened the windows so that we could hear better, and so that they wouldn't break, turned off the lights, and waited. We knew this well. The whirling scream of the shells as they came, the huge round roar as they hit, guessing where they went, where they came from, timing them with a stopwatch, counting, betting on the size of the shells. The boy was sad. He was used to war at the front where you could do something about it, not to this helpless war in the city. But he would never go to any front again, as his leg would always be too short, and you can't be an infantryman with a cane. There was smoke in the room, and the hotel had been hit several times, so we took our wine glasses next door, on the agreeable and traditional theory that if a shell came in the front room it would not bother to come as far as the back room, passing through the bathroom on its way. We counted 600 shells and got tired of it, and an hour later it was all over. We said to one another, "Well, there was a nice little shelling." Then we said, "Maybe that means the offensive will start." On the strength of this, we ate up the last bar of chocolate and called it a night. The next day it rained again, and Madrid picked itself up as it had done before. Streetcars clanked slowly through the streets, collecting the falling bricks, the broken glass, the odd bits of wood and furniture. People stopped on their way to work, looking at the new shell holes. The front of the hotel gaped a little more. The elevator man, who worked in bronze for his pleasure, hunted for unexploded shells in the rooms to make lamps from them. His friend, the night concierge, painted warlike scenes on parchment for the lamp shades, and they were both busy all the time. The maid said, "Come and see the room you used to have," and we went merrily into where nothing remained except the dressing-table with the mirror uncracked, and I found the nose-cap of the shell in the broken wood of the bureau. On the 4th floor, lying against the staircase railing, was a long, heavy shell that had not exploded. It had only ripped out half a wall and chopped up the furniture of room 409, pulled down the door, and come to rest there in the hall, where everyone admired it because it had a new shape. Some friends telephoned and remarked, "Oh, so you aren't dead." It was just like before. Like the last time and time before and all the other times. Everybody wondered why the fascists shelled last night and not some other night. Does it mean anything? What do you think? In Madrid there is not only first aid service for wounded people, but there is also a first aid service for wounded houses. The men who manage this are architects and engineers and bricklayers and electricians, and some workers are employed only to dig bodies from the collapsed houses. This staff is always active because when they are not propping up, repairing, plugging holes and cleaning off debris, they make plans for a beautiful new city, which they will build in place of what has been destroyed when the war is over. So that morning in the rain, I went about with them to see what had happened during the night and what could be done. In the best residential section, at one street corner, police were telling people not to crowd and to move on. A shell had burst through the top floor of a fine new apartment house, blown the iron balcony railing on to the roof of a house across the way, and now the top floor stood without support, ready to fall into the street. Farther up, a water main had been cracked by a shell, and the street was rapidly flooding. One of the architects had with him, wrapped in a newspaper, his day's ration of bread. He was very careful all morning, climbing through ruins, jumping flooded gutters, not to drop the bread. He had to take it home. There were 2 small children there, and come death and destruction and anything else, the bread mattered. We climbed to the top floor, moving gently into a room where half the floor hung in space. We shook hands with all the friends and visitors who had come to see also. 2 women lived there, an old woman and her daughter. They had been in the back of the apartment when the front of it blew out. They were picking up what they could save. A cup that had no saucer left, a sofa pillow, 2 pictures with the glass broken. They were chatty and glad to be alive, and they said everything was quite all right. Look, the whole back of the apartment could still be lived in. 3 rooms, not as bright or as nice as the rooms that had been destroyed, but still they were not without a home. If only the front part didn't fall into the street and hurt someone. Mud Road, behind the Bull Ring on the other side of Madrid, led into a square, where there was a trough for the women of that place to wash clothes. There were 10 little houses, huddled together, with cloth tacked over the windows and newspapers stuck in the walls to keep the wind out. Women with quiet, pale faces and quiet children stood by the trough and looked at one house, or what was left of it. The men stood a little nearer. A shell had landed directly on one flimsy shack, where 5 people were keeping warm, talking with one another for comfort and for gaiety, and now there was only a mound of clay and kindling wood, and they had dug out the 5 dead bodies as soon as it was light. The people standing there knew the dead. A woman reached down suddenly for her child, and took it in her arms, and held it close to her. Disaster had swung like a compass needle, aimlessly, all over the city. Near the station, the architect asked the concierge if everyone was all right in her house. 4 shells had come that way. Yes, she said. Do you want to see it? Upstairs the family, including the husband's sister and mother, and the wife's niece, and her baby, was standing in their living room, getting used to what had happened. The front wall was gone. The china was broken, and the chairs. The wife said to me, "What a shame for the sewing machine. It will never work again." The husband picked a thin, dead canary off the sideboard, showed it to me sadly, shrugged, and said nothing. I asked where they would live now. The wind coming in, looking down 5 flats into the street, the broken furniture, and all of them crowded into one room and the kitchen. It is bad enough to be cold, never to eat enough to wait for the sound of the shells, but at least one must have 4 walls, at least 4 solid walls, to keep the rain out. The woman was surprised. "But we will live here," she said. "Where else shall we go? This is our home. We have always lived here." The architect said to me miserably, "No, I cannot patch up the walls. We must save the wood for essentials. The walls are not going to fall out. There is no danger from them." "But the cold," I said. "Ah, the cold," he said. "What can we do?" He said to them, "Good luck." And they said to him, "Thank you. We are all right." And then we walked silently down the steep, unlighted stairs. It was night now. Streetcars, with people sticking like ivy on the steps and bumpers, burned muffled blue lights. People hurried, with their heads down against the rain, through the dark streets to their homes, where they would cook whatever they had and try to keep warm and wait for tomorrow and be surprised at nothing. A man walked along by himself, singing. 2 children sat on a doorstep having a long, serious conversation. A shop window showed a bargain in silk stockings. We were tired, but there was a house near here that the architect had to see. A man brought a candle and we found our way up the stairs. It was hardly worth while going inside the apartment. There was nothing left at all. Nothing to save. The walls were gored, and the ceiling and the floor. What had been a place to live was now a collection of old rags and paper, pieces of plaster and broken wood, twisted wires and slivers of glass. The man held the candle above his head so that we could see, and the shadows crawled over the chaos. An old woman had been standing by the door. She came in now. She took my arm and pulled at me to come closer, to hear her. She said very softly, as if she were telling me a secret, "Look at that. Look at that, do you see? That is my home. That's where I live. There. What you see there." She looked at me as if I should deny it, with wide, puzzled, frightened eyes. I did not know what to say. "I cannot understand," she said slowly, hoping I would understand and explain. After all, I was a foreigner. I was younger than she. I had probably been to school. Surely I could explain. "I do not understand," she said. "You see, it is my home." And all the time it was cold. Madrid flowed with rain. Rain everywhere. Oh, the cold and oh, the wet feet, and the thick smell of wet wool overcoats. And we waited for the offensive. The rumors grew each day. They rushed and swayed over the town. People looked wise or sly or happy or worried or anything, and you wondered, what do they know about the offensive? We knew it was to be an important offensive. Everyone had confidence in its success whenever it came. Everyone was waiting. There was nothing to do. And so, to fill the days, we went visiting at the nearest fronts, 10 blocks from the hotel, 15 blocks, a good brisk walk in the rain, something to circulate your blood. There were always funny people in the trenches, new faces, always something to talk about. So we strolled to University City and Usera, to the Parque del Oeste, to those trenches that are a part of the city and that we knew so well. No matter how often you do it, it is surprising just to walk to war easily from your own bedroom where you have been reading a detective story or a life of Byron, or listening to the phonograph, or chatting with your friends. It was as usual cold, and that day we walked through all the trenches in that particular park. In these trenches, in this once fine Madrid park, the mud was like chewing gum. We admired the dugouts smelling of fresh wood and of wood smoke from the little stoves, the bright blankets over the machine guns, the pictures of movie stars on the walls, the curious serenity, and after all, there was no news in it. But on the other hand, it was different at night. Every night, clearly, you could hear from the hotel the machine guns hammering, and the echoing thud of mortars, and what was normal in the daytime became a strange business at night. So the next evening, when the sky turned blue-purple, we presented ourselves at Staff Headquarters in a bombed apartment house. It was a home-like post. There were 3 women, the wives of officers, shrill as birds. A 5-month-old baby slept on the plush sofa, and his mother told us all about him breathlessly, with astonishment, as women will. The major was tired but very courteous. The staff cook wandered in, laughing like Ophelia and a little mad, and asked when they wanted dinner. The soldier who would be our guide was at a dance given by another battalion. They had been making war here for over a year. It was right in the city, and the dance was within 10 minutes' walk, and a man wants a change now and again. Presently he came, a boy with fantastic eyelashes and an easy laugh, and we walked a block, went down some slippery steps, and were in the trenches. The flashlight was fading, and the mud pulled at our shoes, and we had to walk bent over to avoid hitting the low beams that held up the trench, and it was very cold. In the 3rd line we leaned against the mud walls and looked at the thin, stripped trees of what had once been a city park, and listened. We had come to hear the loudspeakers. At night, one side or the other presents the soldiers in those trenches with a program of propaganda and music. The loudspeakers were hidden near the front line, and you could hear everything, as you can hear a telephone conversation. Tonight the enemy was speaking. A careful, pompous radio voice began, "The chief of Spain, the only chief, is willing to give his blood for you. Franco. Another soldier had come up, and he and our guide lighted cigarettes, and our guide, who was anxious for us to enjoy ourselves, said, "This talking part is very tiresome, but it won't last long. Afterward comes music." Suddenly, blaring across the narrow no-man's land, we heard Kitten on the Keys played 7 times too fast. "Ha," said our guide, "that is very pretty, that is American music." Then the smooth, careful voice came back. "Your leaders live well in the rear guard while you are giving guns to go out and die." There was a burst of irritated machine-gun fire after his remark. "He is too stupid," the soldier guide said, with disgust. Usually we did not listen to him. Why doesn't he stop talking and play the music? The music is very nice. We all enjoy the music. It helps pass the time. At this point the music started. Valencia, diddle, 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 dee. It went on for about an hour. We were moving forward with some difficulty because the flashlight had worn out, feeling our way through covered trenches with our hands out, touching both walls, bending beneath the beams of tunnels, slipping on the duckboards when there were any, or stumbling in mud. At one point a mortar exploded, flashing through the trees, and the machine guns clattered an answer. The radio voice said, "Viva Franco! Arriba España!" and we could hear from up ahead in the 1st line the jeers of the government troops. Then we heard the voice, but not the words, of a soldier who was answering that remote radio orator. The guide explained, "The fight will now start. Now it is mainly a joke, but that loudspeaker used to make us angry. We have heard it so much, and we know it is so silly, and sometimes it announces a great victory right here, where we have been all day and seen nothing, and we do not pay attention to it. But it is the custom to answer back." Very thin and high, and through the trees, we could still hear the soldier's voice, shouting. "He says," the guide said, after listening, "that it is useless to talk to them in Spanish because they are all Moors over there." We waited but could not make out any other words. The guide went on. "One of our boys usually tells them they are liars and are destroying Spain, and they tell him he is a murderous rat, and later they will get angry and throw mortars at one another. Their loudspeaker is a waste of time, but their music is agreeable." "You seem very much at home here," I said, because it suddenly struck me that we were as casual as people at an outdoor concert in any peacetime city in the summer. The stadium in New York with all the stars, that place in a park in St. Louis, with the 2 great trees growing from the stage, the little brass bands in the little squares in Europe. I thought, it takes something to be so calm about war. "These trenches are good," the soldier said. "You can see that for yourself. And we have been here a long time. The machine guns down by the Puente de los Franciscas echoed over the black land. If necessary," the boy said quietly, "we can stay here forever." I asked where the government loudspeaker was. He said probably up the line somewhere, toward the clinical hospital. They didn't always work at the same place at the same time. "You should come and hear ours some night," the guide said. "We have very pretty music too, but only Spanish songs. You would like it." We were by this time in a communicating trench, on our way to the first line. A mortar shook the walls of the trench and scattered mud over us, and did not explode, to everyone's delight. The guide said to the other soldier, "It is scarcely worth while to kill foreign journalists for a little music." He told us he couldn't take us farther, and, as we could see, both the music and the speaking were finished, and now there were only mortars. We argued it, pressing ourselves against the walls of the trench, but he said, "No, the major would be very angry with me, and I will get in trouble." So we went back as we had come. "Well," the major said, "how did you enjoy it?" "Very much." "How was the music?" "A little too fast." "I have here something that will interest you," the major said. He took a rocket, like a 4th of July rocket, from the table. "The fascists send these over with propaganda in them, and sometimes I write an answer and we send them back. It is quite a discussion." He now showed us the propaganda. "It is too much," he said. "It makes you laugh. They think we know nothing. Look at this." He thumbed through the little booklet quickly, dismissing the statements he had seen before and arguments he considered either too boring or too ridiculous. One page started, "What are you fighting for?" The major smiled and said, "That's something we all know." He then read us his reply, all very careful, all very dull. And we said, "That is fine." A lieutenant offered me some acorns, and the talk turned to America. The guide said he knew a great deal about America because he had read Zane Grey and also James Oliver Curwood, although he realized that was about Canada. "Aragon must be very much like Arizona, no?" "Yes, that's right." The major said when the war was over he would like to visit America, but he was a poor man. "I am a worker," he said gently and yet proudly. "Would I ever have enough money to go to America?" "Certainly," we said. "Well then, how much?" Now, that was difficult. In the cities it was more, in the small towns less. Travel by bus was not expensive. "Well, it's hard to say how much it would cost, Comandante." "How about $2? Could you do it with $2 a day?" "That depends," I said. "Well, $3. "Oh, surely with $3. They were all quiet. The major looked at his adjutant. "Hombre," he said, 36 pesetas a day. Something. And then to me, well, there is much work to do here and we are all needed. But America must be so beautiful. I would like all the same to see it." At the end of the cold, wet, waiting days, Chicote's is the place to go in search of company and conversation and more rumors about the offensive. Chicote's used to be a bar where the elegant young men of Madrid came to drink a few cocktails before dinner. Now it is like a dugout on the Gran Via, that wide, rich street where you can hear the shells, even when there is silence. Chicote's is not in a safe locality at all, and every day it is so crowded that you remember, comfortably, the subway at 5 o'clock, Times Square, and the Grand Central Station. A group of us were sitting in Chicote's wondering whether to drink the sherry, which was tasteless, or the gin, which was frankly fatal. The English girl, who looked like a small, good-humoured boy, drove an ambulance for a base hospital. One of the men, a German, wrote for a Spanish newspaper and was now talking rapid French about politics. There were 2 American soldiers, the 2 wonderfully funny ones, so young, and so much braver and gayer than people usually are. The smoke from black tobacco was choking, the noise deafening. Soldiers at other tables shouted their news. The indomitable girls with dyed hair and amazing high heels waved and smiled. People walked in through the sandbagged door and stared, and saw no one they knew or nothing they liked, and walked out again. In this crowded din, one could be entirely alone and quiet, and think one's own thoughts about Spain and the war and the people. How is it going to be possible ever to explain what this is really like? All you can say is, this happened, that happened, he did this, she did that. But this does not tell you how the land looks on the way to the Guadalmara. The smooth brown land, with olive trees and scrub oak growing beside the dry stream beds, and the handsome mountains curving against the sky. Nor does this tell of Sanchez and Ausino, and the others with them, those calm young men who were once photographers or doctors or bank clerks or law students, and who now shape and train their troops so that one day they can be citizens instead of soldiers. And there is no time to write of the school where the children were making little houses of clay and dolls from cardboard, and learning to recite poetry, and missed school only when the shelling was too bad. And what about all the rest, and all the others? How can I explain that you feel safe at this war, knowing that the people around you are good people?